Hi, I'm Seraphine. They said I was dramatic when I asked why my sister was given everything and I was handed nothing. But that question, it cost me my name, my place, and my skin. One night, my whole family held me down while my father pressed a burning brand into my back, because I dared to ask about a trust fund. They told people I was unstable, sent me away, took my business, used my words as if they were born from their mouths. But what happens when the silence they fed me becomes the voice they can't silence anymore? Would you stay quiet? If your own name had been buried, some birthdays stay with you, not because they were celebrated, but because you were never meant to be there in the first place. I was 17 when it happened. Late spring in Charleston, the kind of weekend when the air is thick with jasmine and expectations, our family's backyard had been transformed into a stage, white tents, fairy lights, a live jazz trio playing Ella Fitzgerald. The scent of grilled oysters and bourbon-laced barbecue drifted through the garden, and Callista stood at the center of it all, our family's golden girl, turning 18. I wasn't a guest. I wasn't even background noise. I was part of the catering staff. They gave me a black polo shirt and a name tag that read, Sarah, not Seraphine. Sarah. My own mother handed it to me with a clipped, "Don't make this about you." As I refilled glasses and cleared half-eaten sliders, I listened to grown-ups fawn over Callista. She's going places. Top of her class, right? She looks like she was born for the stage. Every word felt like a shove further into invisibility. Then someone brushed past me too fast, knocking a tray of mini crab cakes out of my hands. I bent to clean it up, but before I could get the last one, a man barked, "Watch it, staff!" I looked up. Callista didn't say a word. She just smiled with that same rehearsed grace she used for campaign photos and scholarship interviews. I heard Vera's voice in my ear seconds later. "Don't cause a scene. This is your sister's moment." Of course it was. It always was. The next morning, I was still in a haze when Arthur told us to get in the car. "Lawyer stuff," he said. "Family documents to update." I grabbed my bag, hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, they were finally including me in something that mattered. When we got there, he parked outside a white stucco law office downtown. I reached for the door handle, but Vera didn't even look up from her phone. "Stay in the car, sweetie. We won't be long." I sat there, engine off, air stagnant. 30 minutes passed, then 45. I saw glimpses through the glass doors, Arthur laughing, Callista signing something, Vera nodding. Words trickled through a cracked window when someone exited for a phone call. Callista's designation. Confirmed. She signs solo, the rest as advisors. A security guard walked past and paused. "You good, sweetheart?" he asked, kind but cautious. I smiled too fast. "Yeah, just waiting on my family." But inside, something twisted. You don't get left out of a legacy. You get erased. Dinner that night was fried chicken and mashed potatoes. Callista's plate had cornbread and collard greens, mine had a half drumstick and one scoop of starch. It wasn't even the food. It was the silence. I cleared my throat halfway through the meal. "So, what were the papers for today?" Arthur slammed his fork on the table. "You think this family owes you explanations?" Callista didn't miss a beat. "Maybe if you looked like an heiress instead of someone who just rolled out of a locker room." The laughter from her lips wasn't loud, but it echoed. Even the dog got scraps from Arthur's plate. Me? I rinsed mine off before putting it in the dishwasher. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, hearing nothing and everything all at once. My journal sat open beside me. No words yet. Just a blank page and my pen, waiting. I remembered something Grandma Ruth once told me after I didn't get picked for the school debate team. Silence isn't obedience, it's just loading ammunition. I started writing, every comment, every moment, every look. Not because I was sentimental, but because I knew one day memory would be my weapon. I passed the hallway around 2 a.m., barefoot and silent. The family portrait on the wall had been updated again. Callista, Vera, Arthur, smiling in perfect light. My face, as always, slightly out of focus, as if the photographer had trouble remembering I was there. But I remembered. I remembered everything. I wasn't invited to the celebration, but I would make sure I hosted the reckoning. The kitchen was quiet the next morning, but not in a peaceful way. The kind of quiet that hums beneath the surface, like the pause before a glass shatters. Sunlight spilled through the blinds and onto the cold tile, making every inch of the room feel clinical, like a hospital waiting room where no one wants to say the first word. Arthur sipped his coffee with the precision of someone rehearsed. Callista scrolled on her phone with her perfectly manicured fingers, and Vera moved around like a hostess, not a mother. The only sound came when Callista set her phone down with just enough flair to draw attention. Dad said I've earned leadership. Guess that's what happens when you actually contribute to the family. Her voice held a sweetness so fake it could rot teeth. I didn't respond, not out loud, but something in my gut started to shift, like soil giving way beneath roots. Later that afternoon, Vera called me into the study. Her tone was breezy, almost cheerful, but I knew that voice. It was the one she used when offering poisoned honey. "Just a quick form, darling," she said, handing me a thick packet of paper. The top page read, "Internal Scholarship Exchange Acknowledgement." I flipped through the first few pages, my eyes narrowing at the dense legal jargon. "What's this?" "You'll get tuition support for the rest of your college," she said, as if it were a favor. "But to make everything clean, you'll just need to renounce certain redundancies, inheritance-wise, standard stuff." I raised an eyebrow. "Redundancies?" "It's mostly symbolic," she added, trying to brush past the word. Arthur, leaning against the doorframe now, cut in. "Trust builds futures, Seraphine. Distrust burns bridges. Sign it now, and we all move forward." That phrase stayed with me longer than it should have. I sat on the edge of the armchair, pen in hand, staring at the line where I was supposed to sign. Vera stepped out to grab tea. Arthur lingered a moment, eyes on mine, then left too. I pulled out my phone, heart steady, hands quiet. Snap, snap. Page by page, I captured each section. It was the first time I did something not out of fear, but out of preparation. That night, after dinner, Arthur asked me to sit outside with him. Fireflies danced in the dark, and the summer heat wrapped around us like a too-tight blanket. He had that grandfatherly, charming tone he used with neighbors. "You know," he began, "there was once a calf on our neighbor's farm that refused the yoke. Strong little thing. Thought she could plow her own path. But she started hurting the herd. They had to put her down, not out of hate, out of necessity." I smiled, polite. "That's a sad story." He looked straight ahead. "I gave you room, Seraphine. Don't use it to dig your own grave." There wasn't a breeze, but I felt a chill settle in my collarbones. He didn't have to spell it out. He never did. Back in my room, I sat with the documents again. I emailed the pictures to myself, then saved them in a folder labeled Recipes, and backed them up to a USB buried inside a hollow bracelet I never wore. A girl learns. I could hear Vera and Callista laughing downstairs. Not loudly, just enough. They thought I was soft because I kept quiet, but my silence was starting to sharpen. I opened my laptop, went to my drafts folder, and set a scheduled email for 72 hours later. Subject: If I disappear or get hurt, open this. The invitation came through a family group chat I wasn't even sure I was still in. Sunday brunch, formal, no kids. Callista added a champagne emoji and a sparkle. I saw it at 9:13 a.m. Brunch was at 10. I showed up in a dress that hadn't seen daylight in 2 years and pulled my hair back in a way Vera used to say made me look less tired. When I arrived, the valet hesitated. "Family or staff?" he asked, eyes flicking toward my plain heels. "Family," I said. But the word tasted like cardboard. Inside, the Bledsoe estate was dressed to impress. Crystal on the table, linen napkins folded into perfect triangles, the kind of display meant to impress donors, not daughters. Callista sat at the head, where Arthur usually sat, fielding compliments like a first lady. "You've matured into the role," someone said. Another replied, "A legacy in pearls." Arthur gave the blessing with a forced reverence, like he was trying to outpray his own ego. My seat, placed conspicuously 3 spaces down, had no place card. I sat anyway. As the meal unfolded, Callista was presented with a small velvet box. She gasped with rehearsed surprise. Inside, Audi SUV keys. The applause was instant. Vera dabbed her eye like a woman touched by generational greatness. Callista smiled at me with pity dressed as grace. "It's not the car," she said. "It's what it represents. Dad's faith in my leadership." I looked down at my untouched mimosa, counted to 3, then spoke. "Just curious," I said, my voice steady, soft. "Is there a form I need to fill out to apply for basic respect in this family, or do you need a car to get that too?" Silence slammed the room like a screen door in a storm. Forks hovered mid-air. Callista blinked, smiled again. "Maybe you should do more than mop up the driveway, Seraphine." Arthur stood, not fast, but with finality. His eyes were unreadable, but his voice wasn't. "You just made yourself the problem," he said, "not the victim." Vera reached for his arm. "Let's not do this here." But I cut in. "Why does she get trust funds, and I get trust issues?" A beat. Then Callista laughed, softly. Her kind of laugh, the one that meant she was done with you. Arthur sat back down, jaw tight. Vera turned to me, eyes sharp. "You've embarrassed this family enough. Don't make it worse." I stood, not in a rush, not for drama. I didn't storm out. I just rose, walked through the hush, and stepped into the sun outside. On the porch, I breathed like I hadn't in months. Deep, slow, controlled. My hands were still, not shaking. My mind was loud, but focused. That wasn't an outburst. That was a beginning. By the time the sky started to dim, I was home and had pulled down an old storage box from my closet. Inside was a notebook my grandmother had given me, filled with quotes in her cursive hand. I flipped through until one line caught me. "When silence isn't honored, speak clearly enough to echo." I sat on the floor with that notebook in my lap and wrote every word of what happened at brunch. Every phrase, every look, the weight of the room, the way they shifted when I challenged the narrative. This was no longer journaling. This was record-keeping. Later that night, after brushing my teeth and triple-checking the locks, I opened the voice memo app on my phone. I pressed record and said the first words that would one day open a podcast episode heard by thousands. "The day I learned a question could kill your place at a table." The message came through Vera's assistant, not a text, a forwarded calendar invite marked Annual Bledsoe Family Legacy Brunch, RSVP required. It was sent less than 90 minutes before the event. I checked the timestamp. Intentional. I showed up in a navy dress that no longer fit me right and sandals I found in the trunk of my car. The valet barely glanced up. Inside Arthur's private club, the room was soaked in gold light, filled with champagne flutes and monogrammed linen napkins. Everyone else wore pastels and silk. I looked like I'd wandered in from a budget motel continental breakfast. There were place cards with gold calligraphy, every seat assigned, every name but mine. A server hesitated before offering me a tray. "Ms. Vera said you'd help pass these." I stared at him, then took it. My fingers locked around the polished silver edges. My name wasn't on the table, but I was being served something all the same. Arthur tapped his glass near the dessert course. Silence fell like a velvet curtain. He stood with ease, smiled like he was posing for a photo he already knew would be printed. "Family is legacy," he began. "It's not just blood, it's continuity. And this year, one of my daughters has demonstrated what it means to honor the Bledsoe name. She has stepped into leadership, embraced tradition, and exceeded expectations." All eyes turned to Callista. "Only one daughter," he said, "has shown the caliber required to carry the Bledsoe name." Applause thundered around the table. I stood at the edge of the room, clutching a tray of lemon tarts and shrimp toast, heat crawling up my spine. A woman I didn't recognize leaned over to her husband and whispered, "Is she adopted?" He replied, "Or just the help?" Callista caught my gaze, held it, smirked. "Vera?" She avoided my eyes like they were knives. I didn't move, didn't flinch. I memorized every word, because you don't always need a stage to scream. Sometimes you just write it down. Later that night, back at the house, I moved through the hallway to get a glass of water. The family portrait, centered above the staircase, had been replaced. A newer frame, a glossier finish, same arrangement. Callista in the center, Arthur and Vera flanking her. My face, however, was partially blocked by an ornate metal overlay built into the frame. It arched perfectly over the spot where my eyes should have been. I stared. Was this retouched? I asked aloud, not expecting anyone to be there. But Vera, passing through behind me, paused. She didn't look at the photo. We needed symmetry, she said, and kept walking. They didn't erase me with hate. They edited me with style. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I walked upstairs, pulled open the top drawer of my dresser, and removed the brass key to my grandmother's old cedar chest. I hadn't opened it since she died. Inside were Polaroids, yellowed with time, of birthdays where I wore handmade dresses, cards with her handwriting, and at the bottom, tucked beneath a stack of faded church bulletins, a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it slowly. Her handwriting. The one they hide is usually the one who sees most. That was all it said. No date, no name. I sat with it for an hour, barely blinking. Then I moved to my desk, scanned the note, opened a folder on my laptop, and renamed it Visible Truth. By morning, I had scanned every financial paper I'd collected, every note, every family record I could access. If I couldn't be in the photo, I'd damn sure be in the files. They tried to reframe me, so I started building my own gallery. Charleston's midsummer heat pressed against my skin like guilt you can't scrub off. It was late afternoon when Arthur called me out to the back patio. I hadn't spoken to him since the brunch fallout, and Vera had been moving through the house like a ghost, present, cold, and unreadable. Arthur's voice over the phone had been calm, too calm. We need to reset the air, Seraphine. Just you and me. Let's talk. When I hesitated, Vera intercepted. A family meeting clears the air. It's overdue. So I went. Out past the pool, through the garden, and toward the utility shed he'd converted into a man cave last year. I thought we'd be sitting over cigars and empty reassurances, but when I stepped in, I realized I had miscalculated. The shed smelled like burnt leather and paint thinner. The walls were bare except for a single framed quote that read, "Respect is earned, honor is marked." Arthur was waiting. Vera stood near the door, arms crossed. Callista leaned against the far wall, filing her nails with a quiet grin, the kind she wore when she already knew the outcome. "What is this?" I asked. Arthur didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You've been recording things," he said flatly. "Stirring up problems, gathering lies." "They're not lies," I replied, voice steady. "They're memories." He shook his head. "You carry this name in blood, not value. So we're going to fix that." The metallic clank of the brand being lifted off the portable burner echoed louder than any scream. My knees moved before my brain did, but Vera was already behind me, and Callista stepped in like she'd been rehearsing. The iron glowed. My wrists were pinned. I bucked, shouted, but Arthur was faster, pressing the branding rod against the skin of my upper back. The hiss, the smell, my own muffled scream buried in fabric and fear. Callista didn't even blink. She chewed gum, watching as if she were observing a minor inconvenience. When it was done, they dropped me. I hit the floor with a thud that sounded far away. By the time I woke again, I was alone in the pool house. No phone, no lights. My shirt stuck to my back, dried blood crusting along the edges. The pain was less sharp now, more like a fire that had settled into coals beneath the skin. I tried standing. My legs trembled like matchsticks. I found a corner where the fan clicked without turning and sat down with my knees pulled in, back straight, because slouching hurt too much. I counted ceiling tiles. I whispered my grandmother's old phone number to myself like a prayer. I told my body to stay awake, then to sleep, then to exist. Nothing made time move. They didn't just mark my skin, they marked my silence. 3 days passed before the lock turned. No apology. Just Vera, holding a bottle of antiseptic and a plastic bag of clothes. "You're lucky this stays in the family," she said. "That's how we protect each other." I didn't reply. I couldn't. Not yet. That night, I made my way to the top floor of the house, slow and hunched like a woman twice my age. I reached the dresser that had once belonged to my grandmother. I opened the bottom drawer, then the lining, then the old frayed pocket Bible wrapped in tissue. Tucked inside the binding was a folded piece of paper. Her handwriting was still perfect. If they try to erase you, it means they fear your memory. Keep remembering. I didn't cry. I scanned the note into my phone, saved it in 3 folders, and uploaded it to a password-protected drive under the alias North Star. Then I backed it up onto 2 USBs, one inside a carved-out lipstick tube, the other inside the hollow heel of a boot I hadn't worn since college. I didn't need rescue. I needed time. Before bed, I stood in front of the mirror. I turned, lifted my shirt slowly. The burn wasn't raw anymore, but it was still red, angry, uneven. It looked like a scar trying to decide whether it would heal or speak. I looked it dead on. Now that they've marked me, I'm impossible to misplace. Vera sat beside me in the back of a white SUV, her gaze fixed on her phone, as if the silence between us had never existed. "Just a quick stay," she said without looking up. "You need rest and structure. You've been emotional." The word hung in the air like a slow leak in a pressurized room. I didn't respond. I watched the oak-lined road blur past the tinted glass. No one had asked me how my back was healing. No one had said the word burn or pain out loud. When the car pulled into the gates of the facility, I almost laughed. It looked like a vineyard resort. Soft pastel stone, polished landscaping, water fountains with koi swimming beneath. The nurse at intake smiled like she'd rehearsed it in a mirror. "Phones stay here," she said gently, gesturing to the tray. "No personal items. You'll be reoriented shortly." I handed it over, reluctantly, but watched Vera's face as she signed the clipboard. Not guilt, not hesitation, just clean detachment. It looked like a spa, but the silence wasn't peaceful. It was padded. Inside, everything was too quiet. The walls had no art. The schedules were posted in 15-minute increments. Wake, walk, group session, observation, lights out. There were no clocks. Only chimes. The staff wore uniforms without name tags. I asked to speak to Bryn. They said, "That's not part of the healing process." I asked again the next day. Same answer. By day 3, I stopped asking out loud. One afternoon, I sat alone in a white-walled room with a nurse named Lila. She spoke softly, like she was trying not to startle a bird. "They told us you attacked your father," she said, not unkindly. "During a manic episode. You don't remember?" I stared at her, my mouth opening, then closing. "They're worried. They said you haven't been yourself lately." I shook my head slowly. "No, I've just stopped being what they want." She blinked. Didn't reply. That night, I requested a toothbrush and was given one without bristles. Safety protocol. I counted the corners in the ceiling and repeated the list of podcasts I planned to start when I got out. I recited facts I remembered from high school. I sang the chorus of "This Land Is Your Land" into the silence just to hear something human. On the 4th day, I was called into a progress session with someone who introduced himself as Dr. Lindstrom. I'd never seen him before. He handed me a file. "Review this and sign at the bottom," he said, "for your records." I opened it. Patient. Seraphine Bledsoe. Diagnosis: delusional disorder with harmful projection tendencies. Incident: self-inflicted branding in response to internalized paranoia. There was a photo of my back. Blurred, but unmistakable. My heart pounded. My fingers shook. The signature at the bottom read, "Dr. Linwood." Not Lindstrom. "Where did this come from?" I asked. He didn't blink. "That's what's been filed." "It's a lie." He looked at me, calm as stone. "Your reaction is noted." I stood up too fast, staggered into the corner, and dropped to the floor, mimicking panic. Shallow breaths, shaking hands. He called for help. While they escorted me out, I tucked a page from the report, folded tight, into my waistband. They didn't just rewrite my record, they tried to erase my sanity. That night, I stole a cotton ball from the medical tray, dipped it in nail polish, and scrawled a message onto a tissue. "Please help. This place is not what it says. I am not crazy." I folded it and slid it into the laundry bin outside the bathroom. The next day, the janitor who cleaned the hall saw me watching her. She paused, glanced at the folded tissue, looked at me again. She didn't speak English well, but she mouthed the word, "Help?" I nodded. She tapped her chest twice, then pointed at the staff locker room. We didn't have a full plan, just a crack in the wall. That night, I faked sleep. When I heard the squeak of the mop wheels, I pressed a USB into the laundry bag, wrapped in gauze, labeled inventory scan. If Truth couldn't walk through the front door, I'd send it through the back laundry chute. 2 weeks after they let me out of that clinic, I returned to the one place that had made me feel like I was building something of my own, my cafe on the corner of Rutledge and Maple. A modest little spot with hand-painted signage, chalk menus I rewrote every Monday, and coffee blends I'd spent years perfecting. But that Monday, the chalk was gone. The windows were too clean. A letter was taped to the inside of the glass. Property sold. Access revoked. I stared at it for too long, my key clenched in my fist. I tried it anyway. It didn't fit. The lock had already been changed. Voice in my head. They don't take everything at once. They take the things that matter most when you're weakest. I circled the building, hands trembling, until I reached the back alley and peeked through the service entrance window. The decor had changed. My wall of local artist features was replaced with generic, inspirational quotes in rose gold frames. Where my handmade merch shelf used to be, a neon sign now read, "Callista's Roots, Empowerment Through Brew." Inside, Callista wore a tailored apron and a fake humility smile while being interviewed by a local news channel. "We're just proud to be women-led and values-driven," she said. "My sister inspired the heart of this brand." I stepped back before I shattered the window. Flashback, Vera's voice from over a year ago. "Don't worry about the business license. We'll handle the LLC filings for you. It's all family." They'd used my name to build it, then scrubbed me from the paperwork like I'd been a stain. A couple passed by me on the sidewalk. The man nodded. "You the barista here?" I didn't answer. My lips parted, but nothing came out. I wasn't erased this time. I was rebranded under someone else. I went home, shut every window, sat in the dark. My laptop blinked with email notifications, but I didn't move. Not until a headline from a local blog hit my screen. Young entrepreneur Callista Bledsoe wins award for women in small business. The article embedded a clip of her acceptance speech. The title of her address, "Forged Through Fire." I clicked play. Callista stood on a stage with a polished smile and perfect lighting. She spoke with forced vulnerability. "I wrote this speech to honor the journey. The pain that builds us, not breaks us." My jaw tightened. She kept reading, word for word, a draft I'd written during a writing workshop the previous year. A draft I'd emailed to Vera for feedback. Her pauses, her metaphors, my story, her spotlight. "And I dedicate this to my family," Callista concluded, "to the legacy we're building together." Below the video, Arthur had commented, "That's my girl, legacy in her blood." I screamed, but no sound came out. I threw the mug beside me, and it shattered against the wall. There is no worse theft than one that steals your voice, and then applauds it. I didn't sleep that night. I called Bryn the next morning. "I need the notes from last year. The workshop. Do you still have them?" She paused. "Of course I do. I always save your drafts. Want me to email or print?" "Both," I said. "And overnight the originals. I need timestamps." I labeled the new folder on my desktop. Undeniable. Inside it, I started collecting every receipt. Emails, audio drafts, texts from Vera praising the original version. I screen-recorded the speech video. I captured Arthur's comment. I wasn't going to argue with them. I was going to outlive their narrative. If they loved legacy so much, I'd make sure they inherited my receipts. They stole the storefront. They stole the words. They forgot I still own the silence. I booked a corner desk at a co-working space downtown. Neutral walls, fast internet, coffee that tasted like someone once whispered bean into hot water. It was barely past sunrise. My palms were damp. My thumb hovered over the mousepad for 5 full minutes before I clicked upload. The branded silence. Episode 1 went live at 7:03 a.m. My voice opened the show. Calm, low, controlled. They taught me how to scream by punishing every whisper. Then came the clip. Arthur's voice, slurred and smug, from a dinner 2 years ago. That girl should have crushed her tongue when she started talking. I let the silence after it linger. Not edited, just present. By lunchtime, the episode had crossed 5,000 downloads. Comments were pouring in from people I'd never met. Anonymous usernames, full names, people with profile photos of kids and pets and church groups. Whoever she is, she just gave voice to every black sheep. You don't brand a daughter. You create a reckoning. And then came the private messages. Quiet, personal. A woman from Nebraska, a teacher in Arizona, a nurse who said, "My father used to lock me in the pantry and tell the neighbors I was at sleepovers. I thought no one would understand." I didn't respond to all of them, but I read every word. Meanwhile, Callista was posting brunch photos in Charleston Harbor, filtered skies, avocado toast. Her caption read, "Grateful for growth and grace." The irony nearly cracked my screen. Around 2:18 p.m., Vera's number popped up on my phone. One text. "Take it down. It's defamation." I replied with one word. Recorded. No response after that. I leaned back in my chair, finally breathing. That night, I made dinner with music playing for the first time in months. Nothing fancy, just soup and toast. But it was hot, and it was mine. Then came the email. Subject line, "About her, the inheritance." It was from Sable Marsh, Callista's ex. The one who had once built her website, taken her press photos, and disappeared when things got too political. Attached, a voice memo dated 3 years ago. A yacht party, background clinking of glasses, laughter, someone singing off-key, Callista's voice. Clear. If that girl finds out about the trust, she'll come for it. She's stubborn, not stupid. Let's just keep her in therapy fog. Buy us time. Vera's voice. We'll schedule the evaluations. Arthur will back it. Then Sable's voice at the end of the email. I should have said something sooner, but I was afraid of Arthur. I'm not anymore. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I saved the file 3 times, labeled it under new names. I forwarded it to a backup drive. It wasn't just erasure, it was strategy. The next morning, I called Marcus, an archivist friend I met through Bryn. Can you clean up audio from a moving boat, boost background noise, isolate the main speakers? He didn't ask why. Just said, send it over. By noon, I had a title for episode 2. The chosen one was chosen by fear. Bryn texted me, "They still think you're bluffing." I answered, "Not just words, documents, memories, and their own lies." I scheduled the next upload, attached the cleaned audio. I let the voices play without commentary, then ended the episode with, "I wasn't unstable. I was inconvenient." They broadcast my silence. I just started broadcasting back. Late July heat pressed against my shoulders as I stepped out of my car and crossed the parking lot of the UPS store near King Street. It was the kind of thick, sticky Charleston morning where the air clung to your skin and made everything feel heavier than it should. Box 404. I turned the key. Inside was a single legal envelope. No return address, no sender. Just my name written in careful block print. The paper was cool to the touch, despite the heat outside. Back in my car, I peeled the flap open with a thumb that trembled despite every mental command to stay calm. Inside, a copy of my grandfather's original will, not a photocopy, a notarized, signed, and officially sealed version. My eyes scanned until they landed on the line that changed everything. To Seraphine Bledsoe, I leave the estate and original trust. I read it 3 times. Then once more, just to make sure my brain hadn't invented the words I needed to see. They didn't just bypass me. They rewrote the bloodline. That afternoon, I pulled out my grandmother's old journal, the one with notes about her financial advisor tucked between pages. I found the name, Margot Ellis. A forensic accountant, quiet, private, loyal to Grandma Ruth, not the family brand. I called her. We met 2 days later at a quiet cafe near Folly Road. She listened, barely blinking, as I laid out what I had. When I handed her the envelope, she flipped through it like a surgeon unwrapping x-rays. "I'll run it through the registry," she said, "and I'll check the audit trail." Her voice was calm, but her eyes weren't. 3 days later, she called me. "You were named the sole beneficiary of the estate. That's on record, dated, witnessed, and archived. The version they've been using was filed 6 weeks after the original, and the signature's different." My throat went dry. Different how? Stylized, flourished, not your grandfather's. It was meant to look like his hand, only cleaner. Forgery. They'd forged a legacy. I scheduled an interview with a journalist at the Charleston Ledger. Quiet background, private meeting, no names until I chose to release them. "I'm not burning bridges," I told her. "I'm redrawing the map." While Margot dug deeper, she sent me something else, a surprise buried in the financial archives. An account, a trust fund opened in my name 16 years ago at Southern National Bank. Dormant, untouched, locked from access due to inactive beneficiary status. And the kicker? Arthur and Vera had attempted 2 transactions in the past decade. Both were denied due to bank compliance triggers. They had known. They had tried. "They failed to erase me legally," I muttered, "so they tried emotionally." With Margot's help, I filed paperwork to reinstate control. The bank, alert to the legal conflict, flagged the account for further review and compliance action. Once again, the lies started unraveling in places they couldn't patch. I returned home, opened my laptop, and prepped episode 3 of my podcast, The Will That Wasn't Willed. I recorded my intro in a single take. My grandfather believed in legacy, but legacy isn't a mirror, it's a lighthouse, built to guide, not to blind. I didn't call out names, I didn't need to. I read directly from the original will, pausing just long enough for the silence to sting. After the episode aired, my inbox flooded again. This time, more specific. Names, locations, people who'd worked with Arthur. Quiet murmurs of other wronged relatives, other altered documents, other voices that had been silenced. Later that night, I received an email from the Ledger journalist. Subject: "I want the exclusive." My reply was short. "You'll get the story, but the proof speaks louder." They buried my name under paperwork. I just exhumed it. The invitation didn't come from my family. Of course not. It came from a PR director I'd never met, someone who had found my podcast, listened in silence, and forwarded an RSVP attachment with a single note. "If you attend, let me know. I'll make sure you're on the guest list." Callista's gala was being held at the Charleston Museum downtown. She'd chosen it for its marble floors and colonial architecture, the same way she chose words for maximum optics and minimal truth. The event marked the launch of her new foundation and, according to the press release, her formal succession of the Bledsoe family legacy. They wanted applause. I brought receipts. I didn't wear black, too predictable. I wore navy, sharp lines, no shine. I walked in with a supporter's old staff pass and slipped behind the stage before they even noticed I existed in the room. Callista was mid-speech when I stepped out onto the platform beside her. There was a second microphone waiting, probably for the MC. I took it. She paused, confused, and that moment of hesitation was all I needed. "Good evening," I said. Calm, firm, no trembling. The room stilled. Eyes flicked from me to Arthur to Callista, who slowly lowered her champagne flute. "I'm here to read a statement," I continued. "A legal one." From my coat pocket, I pulled out a folded document, unfolded it with care, and read, "Deed of transfer. Property, 212 Ashmont Lane, Charleston County. Filed March 16, 2007. Ownership assigned to Seraphine Bledsoe. Witnessed, notarized, recorded." Gasps rippled. Flashbulbs popped. Arthur stood. "This is fake." I turned toward him. "Funny, that's what the court didn't say." Vera's face tightened, her fingers laced tightly in her lap. Callista dropped her glass. It didn't shatter. It bounced against the rug and rolled beneath the podium. I handed the document to the event coordinator, nodded, and walked off stage without another word. The sound of my heels crossing the marble was louder than any speech Callista had given that night. An hour later, I sat on the floor of my apartment with my laptop open. I started my live stream without makeup, without a script, without apology. "I won't name names," I said. "They already did that themselves." Then I played the audio clip, clear, irrefutable. A deed office staffer confirming the document had been on file since before my grandmother's funeral. I let it run in full, untouched. The comment section blew up. "It's her. We know it's her. They stole a life, not just a house. She's the daughter they tried to delete." Then I whispered something I hadn't planned. A line from Grandma Ruth's last letter to me. "Lighthouses don't chase ships. They just stand and shine." I ended the stream with nothing but the sound of my own breath and closed the laptop with both hands like sealing a box full of ghosts. By morning, screenshots were circulating. Brand sponsors dropped Callista like she had caught fire. Arthur's name vanished from 2 advisory boards. Vera's charity email bounced back a polite, "no longer affiliated" notice. And me? I sat at my dining table with a cup of tea, stirred it twice, and opened my journal. "You don't win wars by shouting," I wrote. "You win by staying so silent they hear themselves fall." Bryn texted, "They're scrambling. It's beautiful." I replied with a single period. They turned the lights on to blind me. I turned them back on to see clearer. The knock came just after 10. A quiet, measured tap like someone trying not to wake a child. I was still in pajamas, sitting at my kitchen table with a mug of lukewarm tea and yesterday's newspaper I hadn't touched. When I opened the door, Narina stood there, hair pinned up in a loose bun, her garden shoes dusty, holding a manila envelope. Her eyes met mine for a second, but her mouth didn't move. She pressed the envelope into my hands and whispered, "I kept this." Then she turned and walked down the hallway without another word. I stood there for a moment longer, holding it like it might be dangerous. Inside was a single photo, old school printed, timestamp in the lower right corner, June 22nd, 7:03 p.m. It was blurry, but clear enough to make your stomach drop. Me, face turned, arms pinned behind my back. Arthur holding something glowing hot. Callista watching with her arms crossed. Vera standing at the door. Frozen. My breath caught in my throat. I gripped the table edge, sat down slowly, and let my head fall forward for a second, just enough to keep from breaking. Later that afternoon, Narina came back. I opened the door before she knocked. "Can I show you something?" I asked. She nodded. We sat on the couch together in silence. "You heard me scream," I finally said. She nodded again. "They told me to mind my pruning." I swallowed hard. "So you hid a camera?" She looked at me like I'd finally asked the right question. "You weren't crazy, Nina. You were caged." Her voice was gravel and comfort. "Why now?" I asked. Narina shrugged. "Because they're scared now. And I'm not." I hugged her without asking, without words. She smelled like rosemary and dirt. She held me like she'd been waiting a long time. That night, I emailed the photo to 3 separate folders, 2 encrypted drives, and printed 4 copies to keep in different places. Then I locked one in a safe, along with my grandmother's last letter and a copy of the real will. The photo wasn't a weapon, it was proof I wasn't delusional. The following week, I watched the family unravel from the sidelines. Arthur was suspended from the Board of Elders. His church released a carefully worded statement about reevaluating leadership values. Vera's name vanished from every PTA and foundation list within 72 hours. Callista's face disappeared from brand campaigns. Her influencer contracts dissolved one by one. Sponsors ghosted her. Interviews were pulled. Press kits deleted. They tried to scrub history, but screenshots move faster than shame. Old praise posts disappeared from family social accounts. Ones that used to say things like, "so proud of our girl," or "legacy in the making." The silence was loud. When the spotlight breaks, you can hear who was never clapping. I spent that weekend redecorating my home office. I took down the notes taped to the walls, the articles, the reminders. I painted one wall a deep navy. Then I hung a single photograph in the center, not the branding, not the will. A photo of me at the podcast mic, headphones on, brows furrowed, speaking into the void, eyes sharp, shoulders steady. Beneath it, I framed a quote I'd written on a napkin months ago, one I borrowed from Toni Morrison. "You want to fly? You gotta give up the shit that weighs you down." I didn't cry when I hung it. I smiled. They called me dramatic. They called me ungrateful. I call myself unburdened. And I've never felt lighter. They'll never forget me now. Not because I screamed, but because I never had to again. The invitations were printed on thick ivory cardstock. No logos, no flourish, just bold serif type that read, "Family Legacy Dinner, one night only." Arthur, Vera, and Callista each received theirs by hand, delivered by a process server dressed in business casual. Formal, but not threatening. I knew they'd be curious. I also knew curiosity, for people like them, was often louder than fear. They showed up just after sunset, exactly on time. The house, once theirs, now legally mine, was lit from the inside, warm and clean. I'd gutted the old decor, painted over every picture frame, replaced the floral wallpaper with matte slate gray. It looked like a gallery, which, in a way, it was. I opened the door without a word, nodded for them to enter. They stepped inside slowly, as if the air itself had changed. In the dining room, a single long table was set, 3 place cards, 3 plates, on each one, a perfectly seared steak, the kind they once said I didn't deserve. They sat in silence. Vera tried a polite smile, Callista reached for her wineglass too fast, and Arthur kept his arms crossed. I stood at the end of the table, remote in hand, facing a wall now turned projection screen. Without introduction, I pressed play. The video began with black screen and white text. Episode 4, The Branded Silence, What They Thought Would Stay Hidden. Voice-masked testimonials played. Former employees, quiet staff, Sable's voice, Bryn, Narina. Audio clips of Vera saying, "We'll just keep her sedated until we have everything moved." Callista's laugh. "She'll never trace it back if we just give her a clean room and silence." No names spoken, but every word was unmistakable. Arthur stood. "Turn this off." I didn't move. Callista pushed her chair back. "This is harassment." "You had a gala," I said softly. "You had a platform. I didn't make them speak. You made them silent." The screen went black. Then one final audio clip played, a staffer from the clinic whispering, "We knew. We just weren't allowed to look." Callista shoved her chair, which toppled and scraped across the floor. It was the same model from her gala. Symbolic, really. She stormed out. Arthur tried to speak, words fumbling from somewhere between rage and retreat. Vera's eyes never left the stake. "You wanted legacy," I said, now seated, voice calm. "This is it. Truth on every plate." They stood to leave. I didn't stop them. At the door, Vera turned to me. Her voice was low, like we were back in the garden at night. "We gave everything to start over with Levi. We didn't think you wanted it." I smiled, genuinely. That child wasn't legacy. He was a cover-up. Back in the house, I walked to my file drawer and opened it. Not to check, not to confirm, just to remind myself. There it was, the original trust, refiled, finalized, in my name. The next evening, I hosted another dinner, same room. Same table, only this time, the guests were real. Bryn, Narina, Sable's fiancé, who brought a bottle of wine and hugged me like an old friend. We ate slowly, laughed too loud, passed around cornbread and memories. At the center of the table, a new plaque sat in a silver holder. Seraphine Holloway, survivor, founder, voice. I stopped fighting for a seat at their table the day I built my own. They swallowed silence for years. Tonight I served truth, and they couldn't finish it.